And now we're living in a situation where it has essentially become the mainstream that we are just surrounded by misinformation, disinformation, and that the only way that you or I can ever know what's real or not is if we have our information filtered to us by these international or governmental organizations.
So set out the architecture for us. Which of the international institutions is really pushing this? Should we start with the UN?
Yeah, okay. So the UN is probably the biggest, it's the most well-known, it has the biggest global footprint. Again, most people don't realise there's no need for them to even ever think about it. It's just the sheer size of the United Nations in terms of the amount of bodies and agencies and commissions and committees. And so there are 50, 60 plus, hard to count. But each one of these will have a budget of ranging between tens of millions to the multi-billions.
So just to give a bit of a tour, so within the United Nations system, the principal organs, we've got Trusteeship Council, the Security Council, I think we know about that, we've seen that on our TV screens, General Assembly, the Economic and Social Council, that's actually a bit of a new one to me, I confess, that's probably showing my ignorance, International Court of Justice, and the Secretariat. And underneath each of these are dozens. of entities, and they receive centralised funding. They employ many, I presume, tens of thousands of technocrats.
Yeah, and if you look and pick one out, I think the most famous UN organisation over the past 5 years is the WHO.
The World Health Organization.
The World Health Organization. And it's just a tiny box. It's just one of just so many. These are huge organisations, that each one, and they're almost impenetrable to regular citizens. There's no way for you or I, as regular people, to really engage with this process. And what they're doing is essentially hoovering up the decision-making processes from the national governments and the national level and deciding things in windowless rooms in the basements of Geneva and New York.
Why is it that the anti-disinformation / anti-hate speech quasi-censorship movements have been so pushed at the international level?
National governments are doing it as well, but there's a lot more pushback at the national level. Typically, your regular citizen does not like anti-free speech, censorial legislation. And if they feel that that's what's happening, then there is still, across most of the Western world, a degree of pushback. Whereas at the international level, it all happens without anyone really knowing. And even if they have a sense that something's happening, they have no real means of engaging with it.
In other words, the closer you are to popular opinion, the harder it is to pass censorship legislation. Or another way of putting it is that if popular opinion is the problem, people having inappropriate opinions, you can't really sit right next to them and say that what you're doing is inappropriate. The more hidden and high up the sort of stratosphere it is, the better.
That's exactly right. National governments know this, and so when I say that the international institutions are hoovering up that decision-making, the national governments, again, I'm generalising here, they're okay with it because they're sort of outsourcing their responsibility. It's a win-win at the national level, because if the people are happy with this taking place, with their decision-making being outsourced, then the national governments within the national media will take the credit. If the people are not happy, then the national governments will blame the international institutions and say there's nothing that we can do about it.